Welcome to the world of Alternate Souls. Alternate Souls is an arena card game where it combines the deck building of a TCG with the board and figures of a chess-like experience. In this game, you will command your ruler and its linkers to move across the board and damage your opponent until they hit 0 life, or spirit points as it is called in this game. Let's start with the basics. In Alternate Souls, you run what is known as a ruler. This is a double-sided card that determines your starting placement for your linkers, how many cards you have in hand, your linker count, and primary will color. Its flip side is known as the J-ruler side, and is represented also by an acrylic figure, though it doesn't start on the board. More on that later. Next, you choose your linkers. These can be anything you want, as long as they don't exceed 5 total linkers, and their combined total cost does not exceed the linker number on your ruler. Be sure to take into account the linker's abilities in addition to their attack and defense when choosing who to join your team. Next, create a deck of 20 cards. They can be any combination of the different cards, but you may only run one copy of any given card. Pay attention to things like color attributes, cost, speed, and other effects depending on the type of deck you want to make and the type of linkers and ruler you choose to run. There are several different card types you can choose from with different effects. For example, there's the spell card. It has a speed from 1 to 3. Speed is the indication of when you can play a spell or any other card. This can be 1, which is casted during your main phase, 2, which can be cast during any phase that you are allowed to cast in, or 3, which is identical to 2, except it cannot be responded to by any other spells. The card has an indication of what it can target on the left side of the card, such as units, anything on the board, only things outside of the board, etc. And on the right side, it explains what the targeting does, such as destroying additions or damaging units. The cost and color attribute of the card can be found in the top left corner. The move card is similar in structure to a spell, from the layout to the speed function. This time, however, the left side of the card indicates the movements you can take with a designated linker, and the right side displays any extra effects or requirements of the card. They are usually explained in the card itself. Additions, once again, have the same layout and speed typing. The left side of the card indicates where the card goes, such as the side of the playmat where it will always cover 2 rows, or somewhere else. These 2 rows gain the effect the card states on the right, such as buffing them +1/+1. Regalia you could think of functioning similar to additions. However, they go in front of you and affect everything the card indicates on the right with the stated effect. Linkers were mentioned above. If you played Force of Will, you can think of these as your resonators. They start on the board according to your ruler's front side. Their color attributes and species can be found here on the card. The cost, which is calculated until it meets your ruler's link total, is found here. Next to that is the attack and defense. If the linker has any effects, they will be found in the box below. One thing to note, any extra link points that are unused from your ruler give you extra will to start the game. Now that we know the basic ideas of cards, linkers, and your ruler, let's get into the setting up of the game. While creating your deck, you choose your linkers. As mentioned, these are chosen to go with whatever theme might be going on inside your deck, and within the link number limitations of your ruler. They can be set up according to your ruler's placement guide, seen here. The ruler card goes in front of you outside of the game board. The ruler figure itself is set on the countdown strip according to the number on the front of the figure, as seen here. Each of your turns, at the beginning of your turn, you move any relevant rulers and linkers on your countdown strip down 1. For example, if your ruler is on the number 5, it then moves down to 4 at the beginning of your turn. Once it moves off the countdown, it is then placed on the gameplay board itself at the entry point on your side of the board. This row of squares is called the fortress. It can go in any of the first row of squares that it is able to. If a linker is killed during battle, it goes on the countdown strip according to the number on it and repeats the same process that we just went through for the ruler. Multiple linkers and your ruler can inhabit the same space on the countdown strip. You may have noticed there are two rows on the countdown strip. The secondary row is for your will, which is a resource used to spend on cards during the game. You have a default amount of will you start the game with, which can be increased at the beginning based on the amount of link points you have left over from your ruler, if any. Each turn you spend as much will as you do or do not want. The will then recharges 3 more will every single turn, plus 1 extra if you are on an ancient city. This maxes out at 10 total will you can play each turn, with any extra disappearing. Each turn of the game has sequences. These 3 sequences are the start phase, main phase, and end phase. You may only take specific actions during each of these. The start phase, you move all of your standby figures on the countdown 1 step forward, and you gain 3 will. During the main phase, any actions are allowed, and you may use 1 will at any point to move 1 unit forward 1 space as well. The end phase, you draw cards until your hand is at its maximum hand size as stated on your ruler. If you have more cards than that, don't draw anything, and you do not have to discard anything either. Then refresh any damage done to units and recover all of your rested units, and then it is now your opponent's turn. During your opponent's turn, you may play cards as well. These cards do everything from buffing linkers to moving your linkers around and other actions as long as they have 2 or more speed. One thing that's important to know is the stack. The stack is what is referred to when multiple cards are played in a row at 2+ speed. For example, let's lay out a sequence. Your opponent plays card A, which is 1 speed. In response to that, you play card B, which is 2 speed, so you can play it during your opponent's main and end phase. 2 and 3 speed cards are the only ones that are able to do this. In response to that, your opponent plays card C, which is a 3 speed card. Since this cannot be responded to by other cards, the stack starts to resolve. Now the cards resolve in reverse order. So the 3 speed card resolves first, followed by the 2 speed card, and lastly by the very first card that was played at 1 speed. Keep this stack in mind while playing cards, as themes resolving in reverse order could greatly change what cards are and are not useful. Color identity is something that isn't quite as important in this game, but still very relevant. The reason for this is because any color card that has a link cost can be played on any color unit. For example, this yellow card buffs a unit by 2. If I target a yellow unit, I pay its cost of 1. If I target any other color unit, I simply need to pay the extra 1 will for the link as seen here, and it now can be played on anything. Keep this in mind while constructing your decks, as well as choosing your linkers. So now that your linkers are on the board, what do you do with them? Well, there are a couple things that will happen. Firstly, you can pay 1 will per turn to move a linker forward 1. You may also use movement cards to move them as described on the card. Keep in mind, each time you play any action on a unit, whether it be movement, battling, etc., it is then turned sideways and is considered rested and can no longer perform actions this turn unless stated otherwise. If your unit would bump into an ally unit, that unit is pushed forward 1 space. If that pushed unit hits another unit, that unit is pushed as well, and so on. Bumping into an enemy unit instigates a battle. Battles are pretty straightforward, as you simply compare the attack of the turn player's unit with the defense of the opposing player, and see who wins out. Be sure to add any modifiers from Regalia or additions, as well as any 2 or higher speed cards either of you might decide to play. After the battle, the damage inflicted sticks on the unit until the end of the turn, and the destroyed unit goes onto the countdown strip. Battling with a J-Ruler works the same as linkers, except if your J-Ruler dies, the owner loses 2 spirit points, so be very careful. You win the game by simply reducing your opponent's spirit points from 2 to 0. This can happen multiple ways, either by decking out. Decking out is when your deck runs out of cards and you have to shuffle them back into your deck. This loses you 1 spirit point. Or if your opponent scores a touchdown, which is when one of their units reaches your fortress. This also loses you 1 spirit point. Or if your J-Ruler dies in battle on the field. This is an instant loss as it loses you 2 spirit points, so be careful and protect your J-Ruler while it is on the field. So that's the basics of gameplay, so now let's go over some keywords that you should know. First is right and left turn. Both of these are followed by a number in parentheses. If you pay that cost, then whatever movement is shown is rotated either 90 degrees to the right or left, depending if it's a right or left turn. Cost reduction, which is then followed by the name of a square on the board and a cost, is used if a target, for example, is on a river, and the cost reduction is river: 3. If that requirement is met, then you pay 3 less to play the card that has the cost reduction effect. Sword break followed by parentheses. The parentheses, such as the number 3, means it negates all damage above said number. You can also have a race in there, such as beast, in which case it negates all damage from beast units. First strike, you deal your combat damage first when battling. So if you have a linker with 3 attack and 2 defense, and your opponent has a linker with 2 attack and 3 defense, normally they would kill each other. But with first strike, you would kill theirs, and no damage would be dealt to you since your damage went through first. Flying. This means it can pass through everything except for mountains. Keen eye. Units with flying cannot pass through units that have keen eye. Phantom move. Units may move as if the edge of the board is connected, for example moving from the left side of the board to the right side, kind of like Pac-Man. And that's all the basics for playing Alternate Souls. Hope you guys enjoy, and see you on the battlefield.